What is the strongest nature build in Age of Wonders 4 and how can you build it? That's what this video is going to be all about. So for Age of Wonders 4, a lot of you guys want me to make lots of videos about Age of Wonders 4. I don't like making videos that generally just feel like throwaway videos just made for content, but at the end of the day, you guys want Age of Wonders 4 content. So I thought to myself, and this is why I haven't done more videos on Age of Wonders 4. It's not because of lack of interest or anything, it's just lack of me having anything to say. But at the end of the day, I think you guys just like listening to games. And what I'm going to be trying to do here is just do more videos just for the sake of doing videos. And I guess on its surface, that sounds bad, but I do have a lot of knowledge about a lot of games. And it's not just going to be Age of Wonders 4. It's going to be, I'm going to try to do videos about every game, right? Because at the end of the day, I have a lot of knowledge and lots of people just like listening to stuff. They just like content for the sake of content sometimes, right? And if I only ever make videos that I think are like big groundbreaking videos with a lot to say, then as you've noticed, I probably will not be making a lot of videos. So without further said, we have Plant God. This is what I think is the strongest nature build in the game that will not use Astral or Shadow. I'm not using Astral or Shadow because they're quite good right now, and it's kind of a challenge to do a build that just doesn't use Astral or Shadow. Before we go any further, yes, obviously a lot of this video is just going to be me listening to my own voice and trying to explain things to you guys. So go make a comment really hatefully talking about that. But second off, do make sure to like, do make sure to subscribe, do make sure to leave a comment down below. The leaving a comment really helps me a lot. That helps me a lot because of the YouTube algorithm and viewer interaction. So let's talk about Plant God. What are we doing here with Plant God? As you guys might notice, or those of you who don't play Age of Wonders 4, I wonder why you're watching this video, but at any rate, if you don't play Age of Wonders 4, there is Feudal. Feudal is a very strong culture right now that gets a couple of unique things to it. One, they get the Defender. The Defender levels up when he, I shouldn't say levels up, he, what do you call this? Promotes. That's a better way to put it. When he reaches maximum rank, the Defender promotes into a Liege Guard, which is a significantly more powerful unit. Even just visually, you can see here, we're going from some chainmail to very, very powerful full plate. This guy's just as tanky as he looks. In addition to that, we got the Aspirant Knight, who, if he reaches once again max level, will promote into the Knight, who is exactly as deadly as he seems. The cape is not for show, it's there. I mean, I guess it is there for show. Anyway, with that said, how do we then create the strongest build to use feudal, to use feudal aristocracy in order to play for the early game, to play for just snowballing people off the map? I think the last multiplayer match I played about a month and a half ago was with this build, and I completely took control of the map, and no one could really stop me because of just how hard I snowballed with, well, this build. So let's start. Whenever you start with a build, of course, you're going to be in traits. Our traits are going to want to center around a decent enough early game that will allow us to level up our units and, as I continue to say, reach into the late game. So how are we going to do that? Of course, traits were limited by trait points, but we have some pretty strong options here. Strong. First off is adaptable. I think adaptable is not like 100% required for this build, but it makes a lot of sense to open with adaptable because, I mean, non-hero units gain more experience. I'm trying to level up my units as more experience. I definitely think you could play around with the traits and maybe get some different options, but it does make a lot of sense to get the more experience when you are trying to level up your units with experience. Possible counter examples, or I guess possible things you could say about this then, is that if you take stronger traits for keeping yourself alive, or if you take stronger traits for dealing more damage, that you'll end up getting more experience from your people staying alive, or you'll get more experience from being able to take more fights. And I think both of those things are true, and maybe you could argue that it's even stronger to focus on making your units really strong and able to level up on their own rather than just taking adaptable. But on the other hand, adaptable is just 1 point, so it's worked out for me really good. Second up, I took Hardy. Now, why did I take Hardy? Because if your units are dead, they're not leveling up. That is actually a really bizarre concept when you think about it, I guess, right? So if we have 8 more HP, that means we have 8 more HP from full health to dead. This build will have a lot of healing in between turns, so my units will constantly have their health topped off. With 8 more max HP, this doesn't help me heal in between rounds or anything, but my units will constantly, as I said, they'll be topped off, so it just makes it harder for my units to die in one battle from full HP, some they can get back to heal to full, some they can stay alive, so then we can continue to be alive to level up. Mount Masters. Now, Mount Masters puts everyone as an optional cavalry on a horse. For those of you guys who don't play Age of Wonders 4, again, or those of you guys who don't pay the most attention to Age of Wonders 4, Mount Masters has horrible drawbacks, actually. Despite on paper, it seems really good at first glance, quite obvious, but it does have one big flaw. See, the militia is not an optional cavalry, but the defender is. Now, the defender and the liege guard getting on a mount is quite strong. This is way more movement speed. This gives them way more options. It's just very, very powerful to put such a tanky dude on a mount, right? It also allows us to have the liege guard and the knight both on mounts, and just gives us a lot of movement and control of our battlefield. So what, of course, is the downside? Well, for most of you, nothing. But for those of you who use auto battles, actually a lot. Why is that? Because the archer is not an optional cavalry, and the militia is not an optional cavalry. So the defender will be the only dude on a mount, and if you do auto battles, the AI will sprint him forward into the enemy lines, and he will get focused fired, and he will die, which is not great if we're trying to keep this guy alive to level him up. Now, the positives of Mount Masters, well, it's pretty obvious. I mean, you get a mounted Giga Soldier footman. You get a men-at-arms, except he's on a horse. I mean, he's basically a knight light. Not as good as a knight, but I mean, he's pretty good, right? So the liege guard getting mounted is, in my opinion, worth the downside that every so often a defender will sprint up and die. Now, once you get 3 or 4 defenders in your army anyway, they'll all sprint up in unison, and therefore this totally mitigates the disadvantage. But it's just something to keep in mind in the early game, that if you're trying to bolster your army by using militia, that the militia will often not actually help the defenders stay alive, because they're just going to be slower, and he's going to run up and he's going to get himself killed, which obviously is not great. For my last point here, my last 2 trait points, we went strong because I just want to do more damage. Now, of course, we're using a lot of shielded units. Shielded units are notorious for not dealing the most damage. In fact, I think they deal the least damage of any unit type in the game. Maybe supports deal less, but you get the idea, right? And so if we actually want to win battles before we get attritioned every single time, we need to be doing more damage. Well, strong is damage. Strong also affects our militia, our defenders, our archers. All our early game units are affected by it. The only thing that isn't affected is supports. We don't have anything above supports, but at the end of the day, supports aren't really worth considering. Strong is just obviously very strong, and it's a good way to just get us more damage to win our early game battles, especially before we get lots of damage enchantments. And it does scale well as well. Maybe it doesn't scale as well as something like maybe resistant or tough, but it's very, very good. And it's going to be stronger than those 2 options in the early game, stronger than them in the mid game, and maybe you could argue a little bit less strong in the late game, but it's still pretty strong. Okay. So feudal, we're going to go feudal, and we're going to go aristocracy, because I think when you make a faction in Age of Wonders, you should start with a culture, or you should start with maybe a magical unit you want to use. You want to start with an idea, right? So our idea, the entire reason for trying to come up with this build, of course, was to buff the liege guard and the knight. That's how we started, right? The core foundation of the entire build in Age of Wonders 4 needs to be on how do I get this thing to be really strong. And of course, the majority of your time, that's going to be a culture unit, right? So the culture unit is the knight, and that's what we're trying to buff. Now, other cultures you could argue are going to go for a tier 3 tome unit, and I think that that's true. So for example, Pyre Templar is a good unit to build around. Or maybe the, oh, I can't even remember that dude's name. The, why can't I think of his name? The Stormbringer, there we go. The Stormbringer would be good to build around. And those are tome units you could build around, and that's definitely, you know, you don't have to start with your culture in that build. So I'm not saying always start with your culture to try to make your build, but you have to start with like a unit or something you're trying to build around for your build, obviously, right? Like if you're trying to, I'm going to buff archers, you can't decide your culture last if you're going to go with an archer build, right? So feudal, aristocracy. Now let's talk about aristocracy then. Aristocracy is very good because units produced in feudal cities become part of their city's feudal house, gaining experience as their liege lord gains renown. So once again, we have another way to give more experience to our units, and for those of you guys who don't understand feudal aristocracy, it gives you lots of end of turn healing on your units, keeping them alive, and gives them more max HP, which also keeps them alive. So feudal aristocracy gives us access to these units who will promote if they level up. It gives them even more experience, so it's synergizing with itself. It's giving itself lots of self-healing, and it's giving itself lots of HP. So we're healing a lot, we're tanky, and of course, feudal aristocracy as compared to monarchy. Monarchy, of course, uses longbows. Aristocracy uses the liege guard, so we already have synergy there. But the last thing I would say that kind of puts the death knell in attempting this build with monarchy, simply put, is that putting all your buffs onto one unit type is going to be better. We're buffing melee. Monarchy, we tried to buff range and melee. That's not that great. But maybe you could argue that you just sit on the defender and don't upgrade it to a liege guard, and then you just use the monarchy buffs. Maybe you could argue that, but I don't think that's great either, because aristocracy reduces the upkeep of your armies based on the renown of the heroes who lead the army. So if we're going to have a build that's going to have potentially a lot of tier 3 units earlier in the game than you could afford, then we're going to have to be using aristocracy to be reducing the upkeep of all those units. Monarchy gives you a complete upkeep removal of your king's army, but aristocracy gives you a lot of upkeep removal on many armies, and this build will have many, many, many armies. Okay, so I accidentally clicked the thing, and here we go into society traits. Now, society traits are general overall buffs for your entire faction. How do we then choose to go about them? Well, I went Fabled Hunters, because Fabled Hunters is generically really, really, really good. It also gives us more healing, which when you combo that healing with feudal aristocracy's healing, again, we're just healing a lot. We're keeping these units topped off on HP in between turns, which lets them live to level up. I'm going to keep saying that because it's important. The units need to be alive to level up. So it's a lot of healing right here. But then, of course, we have Devotees of Good. Now, I think Devotees of Good is quite good in this build. It takes a bit of time to set itself up. You will often end up having to take penalties, or at the very least give up advantages to generate more good alignment. For those of you guys who don't know, most of the time you can take a short-term advantage for evil alignment, or you can give up that advantage for good alignment. Good alignment, as the game goes on, is generally not going to be good enough on its own to be worth giving up the advantages, but if you have Devotees of Good and you reach maximum good, it is actually worth giving up those advantages, because Devotees of Good will give you +2 experience per turn if you're at maximum good alignment. So we're giving up these early game advantages to eventually later in the game generate more experience globally on all our units and our heroes. Now, Devotees of Good does buff your heroes if they're of your race, so that's just something to keep in mind. Always make sure heroes are your race, because this will actually help level them up a lot. In addition to that, our cities give us more gold and Imperium, so as we get 2, then 3, then 4 cities, Devotees of Good will just be giving us a lot of gold, which is a very powerful early game advantage. And it'll be giving us 10 gold, then 20 gold, then 30 gold per city. So Devotees of Good allows us to, once again, pay for all these armies that will be a higher level than realistically we could afford. Because obviously, tier 3 units are quite expensive, so trying to afford tier 3 units early in the game would break your bank. And if we're trying to play an early game build that snowballs really hard, because this is not going to be the strongest late game build in the world, right? So we're trying to play an early game build that snowballs really hard and tidal waves over the map, then we actually can't be crushing our own economy to afford these units to do that. So Devotees of Good pretty much is perfect synergy with us. You could argue you could do something other than Fabled Hunters, but once again, Fabled Hunters gives us this early resource generation, 75% more resources whenever you clear an Infestation, Ancient Wonder, or Resource node. So that's going to power our early game really hard, and then the unit regeneration is also going to help. Now, of course, starting with an extra range unit, I say, well, of course, a lot, don't I? I'll try to stop. Starting with an extra range unit is not ideal for this build, so when you look at that starting bonus, it could be better. But overall, I think the entirety of the society trait here is good. Now, we only get 2 civics. Other possible contenders, I think, could maybe be Imperialist, just to start with a stronger early game to get even more gold generation. But realistically, you have to go with a green one, which I'll get into later. But you have to go with an Order Affinity, because we're nature affinity, because we're going to be running a little bit light on nature affinity as the game goes on, which, you know, we'll explain as we get to tomes. Now, Tome of Zeal, we went Tome of Zeal because it's probably the strongest early game tome. The balance in Age of Wonders 4 is actually significantly better than a lot of other games I play, which you might have noticed, which does mean that you don't have to go with the best tome to do good, right? You don't have to do that. But when you're going with a build that already is kind of finagly, I do think you should go with your best tome option. When I play games maybe like Stellaris, the balance is really, let's say, not great. And because of that, you have to go with your best options. For me, I just went Tome of Zeal because it's my best option. Now, Tome of Zeal does have insane synergy, of course. Legion of Zeal buffs our ranged units, so we can start by buffing our extra ranged unit, which maybe by the mid game we can delete those archers to try to save some money. But in the early game, Legion of Zeal will be buffing them up and doing more damage. And as we did mention earlier, we want to be doing more damage because shield units are notorious for not doing the most damage to begin with. It also gives us Summon Zealot. We won't really need Summon Zealot because we already have the militia coming out of our base. We don't really need more summons. We want to just be churning out defender. We want that guy getting on the field, and we want full stacks of defenders being supported. Fanatical Workforce allows us to absolutely just chew right through that early game production with 60 more production for 3 turns. It's 180 extra production. We do lose 20 food here, which you could argue will cost you a bit. But if I look at our buildings here real quick, I actually just remembered. I don't remember what the building is called. The aristocratic building, the one that I build all the time that I should definitely know off the top of my head. Yes, that building, the one I should remember that I do not remember, and I'm gonna find it here. Here we go, the house hunting grounds. This is your food building, and your food building gives you additional draft. So you can build the food building to offset the negative of you can build your food building to offset the disadvantage of fanatical workforce, negative 20 food. So you're getting negative 20, but you're getting plus 10 food from your unique feudal aristocratic building, and then you're also getting draft from that building. The draft allows you to draft out more defenders. So we're getting 2 good advantages from an early building with feudal aristocratic, and then you can go with the tier 2 of that building, which gives you even more food and even more draft. So that works out. We got pretty much perfect synergy here with Tome of Zeal, so there's really no reason to look at anything else. Now, as for my champion here, this is your lord, your hero, and all that. I'll get into my tome choices as we progress throughout the game in a second, but as for this guy, I decided to go with a warrior and Lance of Glory. Lance of Glory gives him a mount, so he can keep up with your defenders early game. This allows your starting stack to not only have 1 unit running up to die, instead you have 2 units running up to die, but your lord will generally be tanky and he'll be supported by your early game bannerman, so he's not really going to die. It's just a way to try to split the enemy's damage in 2, and when we go Lance of Glory, this allows us to set up to, because you want your lord being within your knights and being within your defenders because he's going to be really strong, so you just want him running up and hitting people. Alternative things that you could potentially do are putting him as a ritualist hero. This allows you to buff and heal all your melee units. Buffing and healing all your melee units is you might imagine quite strong. Melee units are quite strong when buffed. So the ritualist getting all these AoE heals and buffs, he's going to be quite good too. So I definitely have played around with warrior. I've played around with ritualist. I think both are generally fine. Realistically, you could do many different options of this build as well. I've done ranger to some success. I've done mage to some success. Really, the only ones that I haven't excelled with are defender, death knight, and spellblade. I've tried spellblade with this build a few times because I thought having a lord that's doubling as an assassin, sprinting into the opponent backline and assassinating heroes, I thought that would work really well with me having this super tanky frontline charging enemies. But at the end of the day, I found that spellblade's kind of bad in the early game, and then he gets really good in the mid to late game, and I just found that it wasn't really good to do that because I was already my early game needs to be really strong with this build, and I couldn't really be giving up my early game strength to go spellblade. So warrior, he's just solid choice right there. Okay. As for the colors, I went with more of a holy kind of color here because I thought, you know, plant god I went yellow, like a golden yellow. That's just an aesthetic choice. That obviously has no impact on the game. I hope you would realize it has no impact on the game, but unless you're an orc, then it does very much have an impact on the game. So I think that making them yellow just makes them fight a little bit better. It's like a golden yellow. It inspires them. They're gonna do better, right? And of course, I got the army skin decoration, where they kind of have like that golden tattoo, so they kind of look golden. I thought that was really good. I thought that played into the aesthetic really well, and that's about it. I actually just like designing my units to kind of look like it. You can see I got him the tattoo as well. He's a little demonic here, maybe, you know, the hooves, but you know, let's look past that. Now, for my ambition, we went instructor. Now, why did we go instructor? Instructor has some upsides and downsides. You get a minor ambition that every time you rank up a unit in his army, he gets renown. Now, as you might have remembered here, those of you who have a very good, strong sense of memory, every time my lord gets renown, my units in the army get experience. So, they level up, which gives us renown. Then we get renown, which then gives them experience. It's not like an infinite feedback loop, but it's a somewhat feedback loop. And will help you level up your units a good bit. Now, unfortunately, with this ruler ambition, our major ambition is to lead a full army of legendary rank units. This isn't impossible to get, but it will be a little bit slower. Now, that's because when our defenders level up, they don't just level up, they promote to a liege guard. Now, if you can get them to max level before you get your tier 3 town hall, because they won't promote until you get that tier 3 town hall. So if we do that, they could be legendary rank, and we could get 5 legendary rank units into our lord's army, activate the major ambition. Now, once his major ambition is done, he gets trainer. Trainer gives all non-hero units in the army get 50% more experience. Do you see where we're going with this one? Very easy to have maybe 2 stacks. Well, you'd want 1 stack in the early game, and so long as your units aren't dying, they're going to be getting to the legendary rank. So sometimes it is worth holding off that tier 3 town hall to ensure that we do activate the major ambition to get trainer. And then once we do that, what we can do is maybe even start slotting in some extra units, putting them into our lord's army, having him fight with them, and then he'll level them up really, really, really well. What I often do is swap out my liege guard, because you will get the aristocratic buffs to their health and their the buffs to their health you'll activate if they're just fighting alongside their liege. So what we can do is put those units in a second army. They won't get the upkeep reduction, but in the main army we can put some aspirant knights in there, 4 aspirant knights, maybe a bannerman, or maybe 5 aspirant knights, and then your lord himself, and they will get so many XP multipliers that you can get those full-blown knights much quicker than you'd think. So I definitely think that instructor was really, really good here. Then let's talk more about tomes, because we're going to start the game, and you can write this down if you want, but it's not really that. Yeah, actually it is a very big deal, my bad. So we're going to start the game, and we're going to go Tome of Zeal. Tome of Zeal is well, it's pretty strong, that Tome of Zeal, and there's no real downside to it, and it just ends up being really, really, really strong. So I would always just start with Tome of Zeal. Now for our second tome, I'm going to go with there's a couple of options you can do, but I think going with the Tome of Alchemy is one of the more generically good options. Tome of Alchemy gives you that alchemist lab, so we can get more knowledge. It gives us some cleanses. It's just generally overall like one of the best tomes in the game. So Tome of Zeal, Tome of Alchemy, that's like a 1-2 combo right there. Both of these are good. Obviously they synergize with each other. Tome of Zeal, super strong early game. Then Tome of Alchemy gives us the alchemist lab to try to get more knowledge, to keep up with more knowledge oriented players. We got material refinery, and of course we've got cleanses over here. You can give your bannerman a semi-cleanse, not a full cleanse. Anti-magic teacher, it's a semi-cleanse, not a full cleanse. If we're using a warrior lord, he might get on the front line and he might get stunned, which would be a bad situation. So being able to just go, no, cleansed off, that's pretty strong. So I'd say those two are outrageously good options. Now, after that, we're going to go with a bit of a curveball, but it makes sense if you even stop to think about it. Tome of Revelry is a chaos tome. Now that's not nature, that's not order, but you know, a little bit of chaos does just fine, right? Now what does Tome of Revelry do? Tome of Revelry is one of the strongest tomes in the game, definitely the strongest tome for chaos. Chaos does not really have a lot of strong options, right? But Tome of Revelry is so outrageously powerful because of Revels of Carnage. Now, this is a global spell you can cast onto an army, then every unit in that army is buffed for 3 turns to get 30% more experience. Revels of Carnage, as you might imagine, is another 30% XP multiplier, which is exactly what we're looking for. More so than that, though, we also get Blood Fury weapons. So we're getting a buff to our experience, and we're getting more physical damage on our melee units. So we're buffing the exact units we're trying to use, and we're getting the exact synergy that we need. And then we get Reveler's Heart. Now, as you have probably noticed, it's pretty good to have high morale. It gives you critical strike chance. And when you have Reveler's Heart, you get 50% more morale from all sources. This allows you to quite often start the battle at full morale, which, yeah. Revels of Blood is Scald is Realistically, we're looking at Blood Fury weapons, Revel of Carnage, Reveler's Heart. These are just absolutely incredible synergy. Carnival of Flesh is a building. I wouldn't recommend building it. I wouldn't recommend even looking at it. It might taint you. You might look at Carnival of Flesh and think that Tome of Revelry is bad, but I assure you, despite Carnival of Flesh, this tome is quite very strong. Now, you do need to win the game. Now, how did I figure out how to win the game? There are some ways to win the game. Notably, just the expansion win condition. If you have enough land, you win the game. So, what's a kind of funny way to ensure that you win the game with an early game build? Tome of Fertility. Tome of Fertility is one of these weird tomes that gets overlooked, but it does serve a very strong niche purpose. What is that purpose? A shitload of food. An absolute all the food, the most food, every food. Temple of Fertility gives you 10 food baseline, then an additional 3 food per population. If you're only at 10 population, that is 40 food. That's a lot of food. It also gives us more draft, which also has perfect synergy, because by the time we get down to Temple of Fertility, we might be wanting to get more aspirant knights. We might be wanting to churn more units out. If we fight other players, other factions, we definitely want to be just overwhelming them with sheer numbers. Now, we could have quantity and quality, which this build often does have, but at the very least, Temple of Fertility can ensure we have quantity. Quality comes from our other sources. Then we have Bountiful Fields, which is a very good food generation SPI, that's single province improvement. As a building you'll put down on the board. Very strong, this one. Just once again gives you a lot of food. It also gives you a lot of mana, so as we stack all these enchantments down, we might run out of mana, but Bountiful Fields is a great source of mana. Now, there are 2 things here that I think help this build a lot from this one. Now, one is Blossom of Life. If we're stacking a lot of defenders early game, which become Liege Guard, which are very tanky units, Blossom of Life is a spell we can use in combat that gives huge AoE regeneration. As you might imagine, a bunch of really tanky, beefy boys that are suddenly now healing every single turn at just one spell cast is quite strong, quite difficult to deal with. With all our melee units all running in, all locking enemies, they can't really focus fire any one particular melee unit down, and now they're all healing every turn. By splitting all their damage between all our targets, sprinting into melee with all our mounts, and now they're all healing, it's quite burdensome for your enemy to deal with. It's like an overwhelming tidal wave of healing dudes on, well, I would say horses, but it's just mounts. You can choose whichever mount you want. It doesn't have to be horses. Restore the Land is kind of, it's got some niche utility. It can eliminate gloom. So if someone's trying to do a gloom spreading build, you can use Restore the Land to remove it. Summon Nymph is also a decent summon. If you have some spare world casting points, you can maybe get 1 or 2 nymphs onto the field. Of course, you can summon them onto your army, and this unit, maybe not the strongest unit overall, but Revitalize is a full AoE cleanse, which, you know, also gives regeneration. This is just pretty frustrating for enemies when you can just full cleanse anything. It's a little bit good Revitalize. Now, it does have a cooldown 3, meaning you have to use it, then wait 3 turns, use it again. You're likely not getting that second Revitalize before the battle is over, but if you are tanking a lot using Blossom of Life, you might actually get to that second Revitalize. Summon Nymph is just, it's quite good, quite frustrating to fight. Now, this brings us to Tier 3 tomes. What are we going to be doing at Tier 3? Now, if you've been keeping track of our colors right now, we should be at 4 into Nature, and our order should be at 6. No, actually, we'll be 5 into Nature. Order will be at 6. Yeah, there we go. Sometimes words are difficult. So this does give us the ability to take a tier 3 order tome, which we will use on the outrageously powerful Tome of Sanctuary, actually. Now, why are we going Tome of Sanctuary? What the heck? This is another tome that actually has outrageously frustrating synergy with this build. See, we're going to be going for an expansion win condition, and we're going for a lot of people that heal a lot and are quite frustrating if they don't die because they're just going to keep healing every single turn. Tome of Sanctuary has absolutely perfect synergy with what I just said. First up, we have Anointed People, which gives our entire race status resist and spirit resist. The status resist is just really good because now we can shirk off way more debuffs because we're going to have way more debuff resist. The spirit resist is less important than it used to be, but it's just spirit resist. Even spirit resist is never bad. It's just good to have. Consecrated Domain is the beginning of the end for what I would say of your enemy's chance at victory. It's not that much on paper, but we get to enchant a city, and for the rest of the game, as long as we maintain the spell, that city will give all friendly units in its domain 2 resistance and 20 morale at the start of the battle. 20 morale at the start of the battle, you might have remembered, we get more morale generation. Additionally, if anyone ever tries to fight us within our cities, every army fighting in that city, its domain, not just in the city battle, the entire domain of the city gets 2 resistance. So it's going to be very difficult to take land off us or to even push us back, because if anyone ever takes the offensive against us, 2 resistance, 20 morale, it's going to be hard to push through. Healing Spires is just a city structure. We can build it. We get healing towers down. Personally, I've never actually had anyone get to the point where they are fighting the Healing Spires, so I assume it's good, but I have literally never had someone actually get through my cities due to things like Consecrated Domain and due to other things they're going to do. I've literally never had anyone take a city off me. Now, Keeper's Mark, and you might notice we got oh god, Tome of Sanctuary is such a, it's like the biggest dick move tome, but I love it for it, but I also hate fighting it. Anyway, Keeper's Mark. Every single unit will get reduced upkeep. All our melee units get reduced upkeep. So that's quite frustrating to deal with when we've got so many high tier units and now their upkeep is reduced. That will, we're already getting negative 40% upkeep from, if we get a hero to 4 renown, that's negative 40% upkeep in his army. The cap is 50%. This is an exact 10% to bring us to that 50%, unless I'm misremembering some numbers, but I don't think I am. In addition, whenever a unit is killed for the first time, instead, it revives at 1 HP. That's actually how the mechanic works, by the way. It's kind of weird, but basically, you die, and then you come back with 1 HP. You don't resist the death, you die, then you come back with 1 HP. Kind of a difference. It is actually important to note that slight difference, because there are some actual mechanics of that. But at any rate, it gets steadfast, so it literally cannot die, and then it becomes pacified. Now, a unit that is pacified cannot attack or use any of their offensive abilities, but they can have pacified cleansed off. Steadfast can also be cleansed off if your opponent could do that, but you're going to have a lot of units that are not going to be dying. And then as we heal each and every single turn, it will be very frustrating when our units, that even if they focus them down, they don't die for 1 turn, they can back off for maybe a round or 2, get some heals, and get back in the fight. Oh god, it's quite frustrating to fight through. Then of course we have Salvation, which is a spell that will full heal any unit and dispel any negative effect on it and give it bolstered resistance. Very frustrating, this one, Salvation. Then of course we have Sanctuary, which is a decent province improvement. I haven't built it a lot, but when you do build it, it's quite frustrating, for your opponent, that is. The entire city generates 15 more mana, which is pretty normal for a conduit. But then any time an opponent tries to raise a province off your city, it takes +2 turns to raise and yields less resources. The resources isn't the big deal. The big deal is the fact that it takes +2 turns. You go from an average person raising in 2 provinces to 4, to even a chaos person raises from 1 province to 3. So basically, it's completely impractical for an enemy to try to raise your province improvements anymore, because the sheer time commitment just will not be worth it. It's also good if you have other defensive province improvements, like a Spelljammer. Your enemies will just not be able to remove it. Now, at this point, 3, let's see, you got tier 3. There's 2 choices you have here, and I've made a lot of choices here that have been right and a lot of them been wrong. Technically, you don't need another nature tome because we have enough order and we have enough nature that we can get into Tome of Prosperity. Tome of Prosperity will bring us from 5 to 6 nature, which then actually does allow us to take Tome of Nature's Wrath. But if you want to take Tome of Nature's Wrath instantly as your tier 4 tome, or sorry, not Tome of Nature's Wrath, what am I talking about? Tome of Paradise. There you go. Ignore what I said about Nature's Wrath. Screw that tome. Tome of Paradise. Tome of Paradise is very insanely strong. You guys have, I'm not going to go that much into it. It's just boom buff, just 6 of the most powerful spells in the game, right? And so if you want to immediately take Tome of Paradise at tier 4 rather than waiting, because Tome of Prosperity will give you that 1 extra nature affinity to take Tome of Paradise. But if you want to take Tome of Paradise instantly, as I just said, I don't know why I repeated myself, then you're going to want to take one of these nature tomes. Your 2 choices are Tome of Cycles, which gives you Druid of Nature, which is okay. I don't think Tome of Cycles does anything else, really. Most of these spells are bad. Cycle of Seasons seems good. It's another defensive spell you can cast in your cities, but it's really not that impactful. Projectiles Decay does nothing for our build. Druid of the Cycle is okay, but not really that strong of a unit. Then there's Tome of Vigor. Tome of Vigor can also be kind of good. I've personally gone Tome of Vigor myself. Why is that? Super Growth. Okay, for tier 3 and we get Super Growth. Our entire race gets +1 retaliation attack and 10 more hit points. 10 more hit points makes them even harder to kill, decreases the number of units in the formation. So remember, when a unit takes damage, some of the units in the formation die off, and then you do less damage based on those units that die off. If you go from 3 units in a formation to 2 units in a formation, that means you need to take more than 50% damage in order to lose any damage from your unit. It's not really that big of a difference, but mostly we're looking at the hit points and the retaliation attack. Now, that's because when we looked at Feudal, and you guys looked at this knight, this guy getting 2 extra retaliation attacks is a lot of damage. In other words, it can become impractical for your enemy units to even try to attack a knight unless they can cancel their retaliation, because eating 2 extra charge strikes will basically lose you the trade. There's almost no way that you can attack into a knight getting 2 retaliations and actually come out ahead in damage. This means the knights will be able to charge in, hit you, and then they'll either be able to lock 2 different units into range because they'll have 2 retaliation attacks, so it gives them 2 opportunity attacks, or they'll be able to charge into range of an enemy melee unit, be it a pikeman or a swordsman, and they'll just make it impractical for them to be able to win the trades. Pikemen get more damage to large units, but man, those big charge strikes are very difficult to play around. Now, of course, it's not really going to do that much against enemy units that cancel retaliation, but there are some other advantages of Tome of Vigor. We do have Unleash Beast. Target animal or cavalry gets a large buff. It's okay. Mostly we're looking at Tome of Vigor just for super growth. That's it. It's literally just super growth. Now, it's not great to be wasting spells, because, you know, as we progress through the game, we're going to be getting researches. These are all kind of dead for this build. None of these are very good. None of these 4 are very good. So it's only super growth. But we do, of course, have the advantage, as you saw earlier here in Tome of Sanctuary, where we want all 5 of these. So we will have tomes giving us the, let's say, ability to get spells that are good, researches that are good. It's just, we're going to be filling our RNG with bad options here, because none of these 4 are good options. So every time we have a spell show up, or sorry, I should say, every time we have our next research show up, we're going to have 4 duds showing up potentially all the time. So we will have to shuffle spells through, but super growth is very, very strong on knights, and I've gone with that. And of course, if you do go Tome of Vigor, you don't have to, but if you do, that allows you to get Tome of Paradise instantly at tier 4. Now, Tome of Paradise kind of completes this build into being the most frustrating piece of crap on the planet. Nature's Bounty is a, we get 15 more max HP on all units in a province for 2 turns. That is a world map spell that will also help you in battles, because you're just getting 15 more max HP. You might be understanding where the max HP is going, right? Guys, Chosen is a major race transformation that gives us the plant type, 3 status resist, 20 hit points. So that's 3 status resist from the Order Tome, another 3 status resist from Guys Chosen. That's 6 status resist. Our units will have a very low chance of having any debuff hit us. Additionally, we get the plant unit type, which did get buffed about 2 months ago to have 20% more healing received in combat. Interesting, that one, because we're going to be healing a lot with this build. The Knights and their graceful charge and all the sources of regeneration we have, as well as some other things. So definitely Guys Chosen makes us giga tanky. We're now going to have so much regeneration healing. Nature's Bounty gives us even more max HP. Brings us to Enchanted Bloom, which is another really good spot. I'm not going to go on too much on Tome of Paradise. It's just one of the best tomes in the game. But when we do combo the Order Tome, giving us more more resistance to units fighting in our domain, when we combo that with Fortress of Vines, any plant unit that is summoned or drafted within the city gets +1 rank. +1 rank does allow us to try to get these Knights and Defenders leveled up later in the game, because later in the game, obviously, you know, as some of your units start dying off, you're going to want to replace them, but leveling up fresh units can take a long time, and it can take battles that you just can't be taking anymore, because if you're fighting these late game battles, there's no throwaway battles anymore. Every battle is a fight to the death, so you don't have time to level up your units. So this just helps us get those units leveled up, so the few battles we can take, we'll get them to promote much more quickly. Additionally, all enemy units have their max move points reduced to 32, which means that our cavalry get to charge around the entire battle. If they do try to attack us, we're gonna have way more resistance. When I say resistance, I mean defense, but there is actually a defense stat in the game, so I'm trying to be clear about that one. But we will have way more morale, we will have way more resistance. Now the enemies will be slow while we will be very fast. They will also get a living vine summoned next to them every turn, wasting their action points. So Fortress of Vines, Enchanted Bloom, Nature's Bounty, Blessing of Paradise, Guys Chosen, Exhilarating Pollen. Everything this does is amazing. No downside. Amazing tome. This brings us to Tome of Prosperity. Tome of Prosperity is the ultimate last little screw you to the enemy. Once you have Tome of Prosperity, it's just wow. So Blessed Armors gives us 2 more resistance. So if we're fighting defensively, they can barely move their armies in the battle. They will get run down by cavalry. We get 2 resistance, and then we get 2 more resistance. And remember, we went Tome of Fertility earlier, so we will be reaching that win condition on expansion way quicker than other people. So they're going to be forced into fighting into our cities, right? So Blessed Armor gives us a grace every turn. That means every turn, the first time we're attacked, we heal for 10. With plant type on all our units, that's actually healing for 12. With regeneration, that's healing for a very frustrating amount for your enemies. With 4 more resistance when on the defense, they will not be able to burst you down. So Blessed Armors just makes those Knights, and it just makes those Liege Guard just outrageously tanky, frustrating to fight for enemy. Grand Protection, of course, is a giant AoE, regeneration, bolster defense, bolster resistance, and 2 grace. So now all our units will have 1 grace automatically at the beginning of the turn. You Grand Protection, that's 3 grace, that's 36 healing your enemies will have to fight through. Then regeneration, so they heal more each turn. Ooh. Now, Garden of Affluence, for each farm in our cities, we get gold and mana. As we're probably going to be having a lot of farms in the late game as we're trying to generate food to push for that expansion win condition, this allows Garden of Affluence to turn that farm spam into an actual resource of gold and mana. Staves of Grace allows us to buff our support units. Not the biggest deal. We might not even have any support units or army at this point. We might want everything to be a cavalry unit, but it does mean that your support units will get the Cleansing Rain ability to have an AoE heal. So if you still have some nymphs in your army, maybe they can do an AoE cleanse 1 turn, then the next turn they can do a Cleansing Rain to do an AoE cleanse again. That could be quite frustrating for enemies. Now, Prosperity Dragon this is definitely, would want 1, probably 2 of these in our armies. So if you think your armies, you got 3 stacks, right? You'd probably want in total 2 Prosperity Dragons throughout those 3 stacks. Prosperity Dragon, I probably don't need to describe to you guys, but if I do need to describe it to those guys, it's because you have Reign of Prosperity. Reign of Prosperity gives a grace stack globally to every unit on our field, and every unit on our field loses 1 negative status effect. It's going to be quite difficult for enemies to put debuffs on us, and every turn, if we have 2 Prosperity Dragons, they take turns, Reign of Prosperity, 1 turn Reign of Prosperity, the other turn Reign of Prosperity, right? The 2 dragons they're just doing this, right? They're just boom, 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 boom. So we just have so many stacks of grace. The enemies are now trying to fight through grace, and now trying to fight through regeneration. We're so fast, we're locking them all into as many 1v1s as we can try to get them. These are 1v1s that they have no hope of winning because we're just going to be healing so much. Shrine of Prosperity is, of course, another way to turn these these farms into actual resources. We get 10% of our food is converted into gold generation, and we get more food per farm or forester that's adjacent, and more city stability per farm or forester that's adjacent. So our built up cities will have 100 stability, which with Tome of Paradise is a 30% output modifier, and we'll just have a lot of gold generation, so we can very much afford these armies. Late game, you could have like 5 or 6 or even 7 stacks of armies because we're generating experience per turn on our Lord. All our heroes should have the experience per turn on their skills so that they can try to level up these units passively. And then we've got the Devotees of Good giving them bonus experience. So we're probably going to want a lot of armies, a lot of stacks that are just passively leveling up so that we have these Liege Guard and we have these actual knights ready so that if we lose a battle, we can chunk another stack of actual leveled up units rather than trying to level them up after we need them, because you want them leveled up before you need them leveled up, because you can't really do that in a pinch, right? This is just a crap load of gold. Now, Tome of the Goddess of Nature, if you've reached Tome of the Goddess of Nature, the game should probably, unless your enemy is doing an equally outrageously strong late game build, Tome of the Goddess of Nature should be like the nail in the coffin on this one, right? Now, why is that? We got Force of Nature. We do an outrageous damage boost on all our plant units. And, well, we made everyone a plant, so we just get a huge damage multiplier. It does cost a lot of mana to upkeep, but of course, that's why we've got Tome of Prosperity helping us, and that's why we get Tome of Fertility helping us with those mana costs. The second thing is Mass Rejuvenation. Brings all dead friendly animals and plants back to life with 50% of the remaining hit points. So I should say 50% of their total hit points. And a 40 global heal. The 40 global heal turns into a 48 global heal, and anyone that actually managed to die will be revived. Between Order giving us Steadfast, so every time the unit dies for the first time, no it doesn't, and then we've got Mass Rejuvenation, which also says anytime a unit dies, no it doesn't. So as you might imagine, this build is very, 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 very tanky and probably not fun for your opponents to fight, which makes it even more fun for me to use. This is Plant God. A very, very, very funny and frustrating build for your opponents. That's it. So use this build on your own. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to leave a comment down below. I'm saying it again to remind you guys. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for being here, everybody. And as always, I hope you have a great rest of your day.